Hello, folks. It's Shooter. Hey, welcome to Weekend Box Scores Swing Trade Notes Edition. Let's jump right into this. Of course, at the end of the presentation, please do review our disclosure. Now, one thing I noticed this week is that the dollar was lockstep with the S&P. That actually is good news because when the dollar starts to win, we'll see where our retraces, or we should be able to see where our retraces come in. So looking at the dollar now, we have a Moody tape here. So we've now been flip-flopping back and forth between the counts every week. And, the difficulty with that is, it's going to find itself a top or it's going to find itself a bottom at some point. I still think the most likely course is lower because this was like an overshoot, drive one, drive two, and then this is sort of drive three, at least looking on the daily time frame. So, I'm considering this 106.54 a top again, and we should not break above, right about where our 90-minute trigger was at 106.27. Now, we don't have a daily trigger or a weekly trigger on that, but just the way the count looks, and also how currencies like to top with a little bit above a 70 RSI, and then they reverse back, down to a reasonable RSI on the shorter side. So I would suspect our count goes down to about 104.45 to 105.74. Obviously, if we break above that 106.54, obviously we're going to continue higher. But at some point, that little leg of divergence that we're seeing on the top side is going to pull us lower as far as the US dollar is concerned. So I would suspect that we could get a decent push in equities as a result this week, mainly because that, the shutdown was diverted at the last second. So I expect a rally first thing Monday. I don't know how extreme that's going to be, if it even gets extreme or if it's just a shallow rally. At this point, we bounced with the dollar in TLT. So again, we're seeing a little correlation outside of equities as well, which, always is indicative of some kind of top. The more the correlation is, the more likely we are at a bottom or a top. In those particular symbols that we're comparing it to. But right now, we still have a little bit lower, maybe 87, and then we get a little bounce, or it could be here, and then we should head down towards our 83.35. I see no reason that shouldn't manifest here. We have two nice gaps to the downside, not even close to try and fill those, so that would need to change. The dollar would need to take a quick trajectory, we say that 6 times, to the downside, for us really to get more of a bounce in TLT. So we'll need to track that pretty closely this week. Now, there's literally nothing in earnings that even interests me this week, even though I've plain out avoided them this entire earnings season, mainly because of the way the tape looked. I just didn't want to jump into anything I didn't have confidence in. Just seemed to be too much risk, and I'm still in that same mindset. However, I like where Tesla is here. We got a little top here, came off decent off of that. I mean, a nice back test, and we're a little shallow. I don't actually have the ghost prints on this chart. I should have kept them on there. But we had a ghost print down here that we didn't print, a ghost print down here. And what I mean by a ghost print is, in other words, we got a count, but it never manifested. So we got a shallow retrace or a shallow push on from where we were in the count. Now, we had no divergence for a low here. That's the only thing on the downside. So, I would think after we put this 3 in, even though it's a 3 right now, I think this forms more of a wedge is my thinking. Our big thing this week with Tesla is going to be deliveries, so that could be a quagmire. However, the markets are expecting for it to be a little light, so it might not be as significant. So if we get a rally and Tesla leads, I don't think it's been doing last couple of weeks, and I've been trading Tesla a lot, especially the opening range, and the dips tend to get bought pretty consistently. So I'm more bullish than I am bearish, even though we had some lower counts on our prior lows that didn't manifest. That also is bullish to me. When we're shallow on the retraces to the downside, it indicates there's more buyers than sellers, and they get anxious and jump on board. So my thought on Tesla, now I would stay shallow. I would like it back to about 245 for an entry, and I noted that in swing trade notes. But I would also keep my target shallow. So if you're going to do calls and not buy puts, I would do like 252s, 3 to 5 weeks out, because they're not too expensive. I think we'll get there in that short period of time. And then if it works, we can add. or just do something conservative like 230 or 235 puts, sell those, if you want to be a little more conservative. But I like Tesla over, and I had a number of other names I liked to the long side, but I did not post them because of where we are with the indices and the mixed bag. I do like Uber, Costco, Meta, Twilio, and FDX for some continuation, but I didn't add those on the long side and realized primary waves is a position trade concept that we're trying to encourage you to enter into a position where we're at a crossroads and maybe we have some significant upside. And, Tesla was the best looking chart alongside, so we wanted to keep it limited on how much we encouraged you to go long here, just because of the risk I think that exists in the market. So now short IWM. Now we get a little decent bounce maybe this week to maybe 181. So whether or not you want to cover any puts you may have, or if you were selling covered calls and then plan on re-entering up there, it's enough to justify doing so at this point. But I'd like to see how the opening range opens. We do have, roughly a confirmed low here. So I would, I do think this count does manifest to the downside, regardless of where our bounce is. But realize our speed line, which, and forgive me, I don't have this on that chart. Otherwise, anyways, now that I'm noticing, but we'd have a little speed line up here to maybe the 200-day. So unless it gets above that speed line, it's not going to change, or would not change my bias to the downside at all on that. So now Qualcomm, we're still hovering around this breakdown line. Yeah, it hits that breakdown line, it's going to flush. So, it'll go pretty quick. And, that's roughly $100 down to about 81. So, but it's probably got to break that breakdown line for that to occur. So this is just sitting on my radar. We've been there about 2.5 or 3 weeks, I think. Now, CRBE, I got taken out with my stop. Now, whether or not we bounce with the market here or not, I don't know. Now, this could be a shallow, and I'm showing October 2, so Monday. If we don't print that low, this is probably our low, and we're going to get a little bit of a bounce, and then I'll look to re-enter that. Now, XHB, at this point, I'm probably going to get stopped out. I think I only had about 50 cents left before I hit my stop, just a little bit in the money. It's not reacting as well because the builders still have some FOMO coming into them. So right now that one could be shallow and we could expect a decent bounce. So I'm going to let that stop, take out my position, and then plan on re-entering at that 80.77 or wherever we get some divergence up there. Now, Airbnb, we're getting a little bit of a bounce, maybe to about 143. So it's filling out that wedge. I think a lot of whether or not this continues to the downside is going to have to do with market, because there's a couple names that were showing some relative strength that weren't prior, like Micron, AMD, Nvidia, even Intel and Google. So we do have some signs of strength, but it's in small pockets or specific names. So but I still believe Airbnb's got to come off with the circumstances that are occurring in the markets. I just can't tell you when. That's just that's my thesis. So, all right, looking at the S&P, we got a little bounce here in the count, maybe to about 440, and we should come down to about 410. Now, whether or not you want to cover your covered calls into Monday is going to be your call. I still think there's more risk to the downside. I don't think this reprints with a shallow count because we're pretty clearly in an impulse leg to the downside. So, shallow would be maybe down to the 200 days. So we still should have some more downside, whatever this little bounce that we may get from the shutdown news or not. So, and, then we would be looking for 410 after whatever our 440 or 435 prints or wherever we are. Now, looking at the NASDAQ, a little bounce, not quite as steep here. We're looking at maybe 364 and a back test to maybe 347. So, and I would hesitate covering the NASDAQ because, of course, it sort of is the weak sister besides IWM, whereas the S&P is definitely expressing more relative strength. Plus, we are at trend support, whereas in the NASDAQ, we've broken below trend support. So I would suspect that we get one more. You drive one, drive two. I'm always looking for drive three. So it should be down there, around that 347 to 344 range is where I think it would land. Now, looking at crypto, boy, we're just hanging on here. Looking at the fluctuations in the indices, Bitcoin's held up really well here. We're sort of hovering around that March 2023 support. So, I would think that holds here because, we've now been here long enough and, we've tested the bottoms and This is, pretty much a double bottom here. We have some clear divergence down here on this. Not as clean as I'd like it to be, but that's the look. Now, GBTC, there was a letter that came out of Congress that was sent to Gessler at the SEC. It basically told them to go ahead and approve the spot Bitcoin ETFs. There were 3, 4, 5 senators that signed off on that. I don't know if that ends up being substantial or not. Maybe it'll motivate Congress to push a bill through here when they try and fund this next portion of the bill for the Ukraine that was really the holdup as far as the debt ceiling extension. Now, Ethereum, it's still holding its own, but, it's below that 1701 support band off of our prior low. So, it looks better than Bitcoin, but only because of the higher lows, higher low, well, low, higher low, higher low. But I just got a gut feeling this goes lower just with RSI and how long we're not responding. And I still like XRP. Now I've got a count of 73.84 from where we are at 53. I've not put anything on because I'm really sort of just waiting for a tag of that speed line. That's, I might miss this simply because I think that's where we're going to get the oomph to get a decent bounce, and we may get above $1 when we get that. And that's sort of my thought on that. But, that's what we have for swing trade notes this week, folks. Great trading. Until next time.